Hello and welcome to this BRT conversation where we're joined by Scott Henderson, who is the Chief Executive of ABGI UK, which is one of the world's leading tax incentive and innovation management advisory services. They manage, I think, over €1 billion of tax incentives and grants and subsidies on an annual basis. And Scott is going to share some of that experience and some of the experience from his entrepreneurial career. Scott is also an alumnus of Edinburgh Napier University and can perhaps also share with us how he moved from a university career into capturing the opportunities that have come his way throughout his life. Yeah. So, Scott, I wanted to say, first of all, thank you for joining us and thank you for sharing your experience. And also, I just ask you to start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, how you got into business in the first place.
Thank you, and thank you, Nick, for allowing me this platform to help with the students. I suppose I'm getting to that point in my career where it's nice to be able to give back, especially as alumnus as well, and give people the spark or the kick up the ass, depending which one they want,
to
maybe try and make that leap. And I think it is about mindset. So, wow, I've done a lot. I think it's kind of probably the quick answer, from being a ski instructor to a chief executive of a law firm without being a lawyer, an FD, finance director in a bank without being an accountant, to now leading a diverse team of over 100 people, 5 offices in the UK, sort of £20 million business. So I suppose, kind of looking back, it was probably moving from being an army officer to a team manager in Scottish Widows that gave me the confidence, really, that I had some transferable skills. And that's probably the start of my mindset journey, really, over kind of the past 25 years.
I think that's really interesting. And actually, I'm interested to hear perhaps a little bit about how you think that your military career impacted your thinking, because I've encountered a number of entrepreneurs who've had careers in the military in some way, both in the UK and abroad. And I've always been impressed by their attitude and the disciplined approach that they bring to everything that they do. Is that something that impacted you?
To a lesser, greater extent. I think I was blessed or cursed, either way, by having entrepreneurial parents. So my mum and dad, especially my dad, was a serial entrepreneur, always came up with ideas, started new business. My mum was the reins on the pack of wild horses. It was my dad as the accountant, trying to find the right balance, and they were a very good partnership. So I think I had that in the bag, I suppose, growing up in that environment. But I think my experience of the army is, oddly, there's no service and there's no product in the army. It's only people. And I was in an infantry regiment that were based in Glasgow, so Glaswegian soldiers who are very fickle, don't like doing really as they're told. And you had to build an opportunity to create engagement at a personal level to really kind of drive motivation. And I think that was really kind of the core skill I probably now have, is that personal leadership and accountability, work ethic. I think it also comes into that. I'm sure we'll come on to that later. But the army has good and bad. It's very hard to generalize. I think you stay in too long, you become institutionalized, too rigid in your thinking. I only did 5 years, so I kind of had a taste and then kind of saw the opportunity to move on.
And you've made some interesting career moves. How did you find the next opportunity, or did it find you?
Yeah, I think I've had a varied journey through that. I think let's go back to the beginning. Coming out of the army, it was advertised roles. So those were things on, now the internet, dare I say, was just starting then. So, you're talking back in the late 90s. So it wasn't really a platform for finding jobs. But advertised roles was definitely the way I went at kind of a more junior level. More subsequently, much more into kind of networking and more laterally headhunting. So quite of the biggest roles I've had are from networking, and getting out there, telling people what I was looking for, asking for help and advice where I might find those. And they came from surprising places. I think if very quick, one of the jobs I got with RBS was because I went to St. Patrick's Day ball, and I was sitting next to, oddly, an Irishman who was the finance director, who was the chief finance officer of RBS in the kind of retail bank. And we got chatting, and next thing I know, he said, later that evening, I think we should come in and have actually a proper business chat. And a month later, I was working there. And it's those sorts of things where every opportunity, if you look at it that way with the mindset of seeing every interaction as an opportunity to either further your career or open a door or a business opportunity, it's that opening your eyes to those possibilities.
Absolutely. And I suppose it's you need to be out there putting yourself in the position where you can engage with those opportunities. Did you find that a challenge at the beginning, or
Hugely.
something you're comfortable with?
Well, okay, so two things. I'm very comfortable socializing. I love that. That's I'm a kind of classic extrovert. Is I get the energy from other people and mixing with them. But it was actually time that was the biggest problem. Is working either big roles or long hours, or family and career all at the same time. Just trying to then drive yourself on to go to some evening, drinks reception or whatever it was, is tough. But actually, I started to create that time in my diary, and try and get away from work a little bit early, or time away from the family, whatever it was, to create the space to do that. I think those opportunities will not come around again unless you actually, for me, unless I diarize it.
No, that actually does make sense, and I think that's a good tip for people, because it's very easy to say, oh, I can't go to that because I've got commitments elsewhere. But actually, if you're learning to make time for these things because they are important.
A great top tip: Eventbrite, fantastic. There's so much content on there, so many networking and evenings and lunches and breakfast sessions, etc., where quite short, sharp. You can fit that stuff in.
Yeah, and actually, one of the things we've found is that you need to go out and try all these different networking clubs and opportunities, because it takes you a while to find the ones that are going to work for you. But if you're going out and trying everything, then you really can expand your network.
Yes, definitely.
So you were embarking on this corporate career at this point. Can you maybe tell me a little bit about how you jumped? Because you jumped, I suppose, between industry sectors and things a little bit. How did that come about? Or what was the motivation for you to do that?
Well, actually, when I joined Scottish Widows back in the day, I found a mentor who was fantastic, to be honest, and was the kind of chief operating officer of Scottish Widows. And I quite fancied the idea of, I got quite a lot of people experience. My first degree was a pretty heavy duty science degree in biochemistry and anatomy. And I wanted much more skills in business. And so I decided to embark on an MBA, and he actually sponsored that, which was wonderful to be able to pay for that. But it was kind of part-time. That was through Edinburgh University, but it was 2 nights every single week for 2.5 years. It's quite a lot of commitment. But it really kind of opened my eyes to other sectors, but also other disciplines. And from that, I said, look, as a kind of 20-odd-year-old, I want to go and do something different, and I want to try and hit the kind of 4 big pillars of business: sales, marketing, operations, finance. And so I kind of had a loose plan of try and get jobs that do at least one of those things over the course of the next, call it 15, 20 years. And so that's kind of, I didn't have a particular plan of it has to be in any order. It was more, I was more open to, if I'm going to move, see if I can get a role in this. And in any sector, I was sector agnostic. It was, I'll go anywhere to get this job. And I've traveled up and down the UK and across the world as well as part of that. So
I think that's a really interesting strategic approach to it. And you were sort of, as you said, sector agnostic, but were there particular sectors that you thought I'd quite like? Was that part of the motivation to when you were looking for something?
Yeah, I think the one that I definitely set out on I'd like to get into was newspapers, actually. So sort of journalism, but not, I wasn't a journalist. It was more just the sales and marketing and management of a newspaper company. And I went down to Leeds, and I was then initially kind of commercial director and then a managing director of a business. And it's so fast paced. Wow, a daily newspaper is an amazing thing, to be able to collate that information and then be able to print it and distribute it. You know, and that was in Yorkshire, but nationally is quite something. So I wanted that pace. That was really what I wanted. Something's really going to push me hard, and it certainly did.
So you were getting into that area where you were starting to, you're managing director level, you were managing the business.
Yeah.
How did you manage to make the jump there? What was it or what did you learn from that?
Yeah, I think, I managed to do the jump because actually I did my marketing qualifications, professional marketing qualifications through Napier. And I actually applied for a sales and marketing job with Yorkshire Post. And well, anyway, I did really well at the interview, and I didn't get the job. And totally aced the interview, and I didn't get the job. And I was so disappointed by that because I thought I'd done everything I could have done, and I kind of closed them on the kind of deal. But as it transpired, they wanted me to do something else. And that allowed that, I think it was more convincing others about the flexibility and approach, and that I could do something else that allowed them to think from a different perspective. And I think it was that allowed me to really can then move again. And having done it once and convinced myself that I could make that career leap from, obviously armed services into normal life, to then do it again to then a different sector, convinced others as well. So I think it came from my own self-belief, born from experience.
Okay, and now that you're sort of starting to manage and looking to grow a business, I suppose one of my questions for you was, would you describe yourself as an entrepreneur? But I'm interested in what you learned from managing that first business and having that responsibility, and what was your approach to growing a business and developing the team and so on?
Okay, so quite a lot in that question. Yeah. I think so I learned a huge amount about myself, actually running a business, and that was kind of across different offices, and it was a multi-million-pound business then, but much more around the importance of cultural fit. And at that time there was a change in overall leadership at a strategic level. I was just below that. So kind of chief executive, chief operating officer, etc. And then I was one of the managing directors below that. And there was clearly a clash, and we parted ways as a consequence of that. I, me out and them staying. But that's because I'm a very honest and straightforward sort of guy. And when there's problems, I'll highlight it. And that jarred when the top team didn't want to hear the problems. So that certainly pointed me in the direction of making sure going into an organization or building an organization, make sure those values, those core values are aligned with my own. Because I think that's where I found most success. Would I class myself as an entrepreneur? I'd say now, yes. I think I have an entrepreneur's mindset. I think something I've seen before is called the 2% mindset. It's certainly worth having a look at. There's kind of number of graphics on that. I think rather tritely, they put 98% of the population are in their safe zone. Will not, quite happy to kind of just doing the job, trundling along. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But around that is the 2% world. And the 2% are the ones who will take risk without fear, make the leap, try something different, go for it. And it's very hard to be on that. For me, it's the only place. That's where I'm happiest. And so therefore, if you have that mindset, it forces you to try something new and innovate, push the boundaries. I think the last part of your question, how do you grow a business, developing a team? I'll say there's about 5 to 7, call it 7 things that I've done fairly consistently that I seem to think that work. Number 1, focus. You need to find the focus, or find the problem, or find the opportunity, or whatever it is. But generally, my experience in business is there's so many things to look at, you just can't look at everything. So you have to kind of narrow that down as number 1. Number 2, very closely in behind that, get great people on board, the most you can afford, just because they transform the business. Just getting other people that complement my skill set. I don't need other people to do what I do, and definitely not people like me. I don't want to meet another person like me. It's other people with a different perspective and a different skill set. And diversity is talked about a lot. I think diversity in thought is incredibly important. And that comes from a different background, a different perspective, a different experience. But you can have diversity per se, but still all think the same. And that actually is catastrophic for a business. So that's number 2. Number 3, your job as a leader and manager, provide clear direction and purpose. This is what we're doing. This is where we're going. And that kind of leads into number 4 is give what I'll class as, but that army thing, mission-orientated goals. So this is where we're going. Your job is to do this, and allow them to localize the plan. So you're given I'll come back to that in a minute, just going to build on that. Number 5, create accountability. You need to allow people the space to do what they need to do, but it's up to them to do it. And then number 6 is I always focus on results. It's on output, not input. So I don't care if they work 16 hours a day or 8 hours a day. It's what happens as a result of that that's really important. And that drives a different dynamic. And then last one is my job, or leader's job, is to set the pace, right? You lead from the front, or you lead what you do, and how quickly you do that, others follow that. And I think, focus and pace are the kind of start and the end point of this whole thing is really important. I'll come back momentarily to number 4, which was mission-orientated goals, or localizing the plan. So in the military, they talk about 2 up. So every single person at any level understands not only their own, but their bosses and their boss's boss ideas and goals and what they're trying to do. So an example, in the military, they never say you're going to do X, Y, and Z in the following order. They go, our job is to take the bridge. That's it. Everyone therefore knows that's the goal. How you individually do that is up to you. But you have to know that the goal is take the bridge. And I think that hopefully brings it a little bit more to life.
No, absolutely. That's really interesting, and I can see how that can be inspiring to motivate a team. But of course, it's dependent on having the right people in that team that are going to respond to that. I think that's fascinating, and actually, I think so. You talk a lot about the importance of communication and values. I was looking at I think that's very important with ABGI, the way that you communicate that, and I think it's about that understanding. This is where we're coming from. This is what we're trying to do. you go for it. And I was very impressed by the way that you kind of explain. You start with the values.
Yes, I think for us it's what defines us, and I think that's an important part of for each of us to understand. Well, what is it that makes you you? And I think for us as a company and me as a person, values are kind of central to what we do and how we do it.
Good. Okay. So let me sort of move on. You're now specialising in innovation funding, and with the company that ABGI. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got into that? What sort of clients do you work with, and why?
Yep. Well, I did a bit of networking when I was in Scottish Widows with RBS. I was in the finance director, done that for 5 years, had a great time. But I was looking ahead to what next. And I went around a few different headhunters and a few kind of networking opportunities came from that. And suddenly I got a call, which was, look, we've got this thing, maybe you want to have a look at it. And it was a really good business that it kind of, well, class has lost its way. Lost its focus, it wasn't growing, and they were looking to, it was a private equity backed business as well, which I can talk about as well if you want, but they were looking to sell the business on. That's really what they were looking to do, and they wanted somebody to turn that business around and ultimately to sell it. So cut to the chase, we've done that. That was a kind of exciting journey and kind of growing the business and scaling it. And that's kind of maybe something else we could talk about. Absolutely. But I think the kind of critical bit really is just the overall government in the UK, doesn't matter what flavour it is, it was Gordon Brown started the scheme, but whichever side of the political spectrum you come from, is they look to innovate and grow innovation in the UK. That's what any flavour of government wants. So we're all moving ahead. Their way of doing that is giving tax breaks to businesses that invest in research and development. So that's a simple way of saying it. HMRC are the people who then pay it out, and therefore make it mind-numbingly complicated to actually then do, as most tax is. So it's a simple system, just quite complicated to navigate and make sure you don't fall foul of the rules. We work with anything from big companies like Skyscanner and Volvo, Travis Perkins, Rolls-Royce, to 6 or 7 people working at a garage doing really kind of techie IT or engineering. So it's a really broad range of stuff.
And so maybe before we sort of get into some of the things about your clients, can I ask just about how did you capture the opportunity to go in and manage that company in the first place? You talked about private equity. They were looking for somebody to take on that business. So how did you end up there, and then how did you grow that business?
So the only way of putting it is they wanted to change the chief exec. And that's how it came around. Yeah. So that opportunity was presented to me. I went to go and interview with the chairman and the private equity team and the headhunters that were involved in that, and looked at the business overall. Had to present a business case myself on some of that thoughts. So it was kind of like a mini case study that I'd done in my marketing degrees or diploma, my MBA degree, where you just did that ability to be able to look at a business or look at the opportunity, to look at the market, to see what's going on there, a competitor analysis, call it a pest or SWOT, or whichever way you want to do this. There's many more complicated ways of doing that, but had to just present, here's my thoughts on the business and what we could do about it. And they quite liked that. And so I got that opportunity. And then I think it was day 3 of joining them, I went to go and see the private equity firm. I insisted on having an interview. I joined on a Wednesday, always a great time to join a company. Halfway through the week, That's my top tip in life. Join a company on a Wednesday, right? Because by the time you get to Friday, you need a rest. So if you do 5 days, you're just burnt out. From finding out where, the whole of the first week. But anyway, we digress. But on the Friday, I went to go see the private equity firm and said, okay, now you've got me. When do you really want to sell this company? And they said, no, it's 3 to 5 years, don't worry. What they really meant is 3 to 5 minutes. So we had a very kind of short window to kind of turn that around. So how did we do that? I think it's super tough to scale a business. I can't stress how difficult that is. If it was easy, more businesses would do it. And if you look at national statistics or kind of the Department for Business and Engineering and industry strategy, 99.9% of all businesses are small. In fact, 96% I think are under 10 people, right? So there's only something like 0.6 or something that has more than 50 people. I mean, it really is a very small amount. So what we did is very quickly find out it's a huge market we're looking at. We're not competing. Okay, one, why are we not competing? So looking at our proposition. And then secondly, focus ruthlessly on that one thing. And we did that for 2 years. We only looked at one thing. And we were trying to sell to every company of every size. No, we're going to focus on one company size only, and that's 50 to 100 people. And we're only going to look at 2 sectors, and that is in engineering and software. And we looked at the geographies. All of this is open source. This is data you can get anywhere. And we see, basically, not surprisingly, stuff gets made. Engineering is in the Midlands. A lot of software IT is in London Southeast, right? Only focus all of our attention, our marketing attention, all of our sales activity, only on those 2 things. And just that level of focus means that we very quickly found out what was working and what wasn't working. And we focus equally on what was working as well as what wasn't. And that's actually a discipline that's oddly quite rare, to be honest. I tend to find people overanalyze on what's not working and think it was either luck or skill that came from why they did that winning that business. And I, back to my skiing days, I used to compete, and I was trained by kind of ex-whiz national Olympic team, and Olivier, the guy that kind of used to teach me, I did a really good run on a downhill, whatever it was. We would spend as long looking at why that went really well as ones that didn't go well. And I think that discipline can really help businesses grow, looking at why on both sides. So we went from really looking at that, and very quickly because you're only getting data just on those 2 things, because that's all you're looking at, we got very quick turnaround from companies coming in, and I was phoning them, thanks very much for the business, why did you go with us? The same as retention, why are you staying with us? And we could start repeating that and getting that out to our sales team. And that short, just that negative circle, that positive circle is really kind of affirmative in terms of driving the business forward.
I think that's really interesting. No, I think it's very interesting, and particularly I think I've heard from other entrepreneurs who've said very similar things in terms of scaling a business and looking to sell, and the absolute importance of good data, which could be analysed to, and I think, and apart from the fact that you've got to have the good data to be able to prove to the buyer that things are working, but the absolute minutiae of the detail of that was incredibly important. Can you is that something that absolutely resonates with you as well?
I love data. Real kind of, I suppose, a scientist to trade as well, is that the data decision making, data-based decision making is imperative, especially in business. And I think what we found, one is we changed our CRM system into something that was, fairly cheap and cheerful, but would collect the right data. Number two, trained our sales team and our operations team about the importance about data integrity and the negative consequence of poor data integrity, and then analyzed it to death in terms of what was working, what wasn't working, but only to an end of making a decision, because you can get what they quite often call analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
You just keep looking and keep looking and keep digging, but you don't make any decisions. It's good. Go in with the right questions, find the answers, move on. And I think just that level of focus on the business allowed us to, certainly when we came to sell, it gave a lot of confidence to the buyer that we actually knew what we were doing and that we were on top of the numbers. We knew what was working and what wasn't. We were acting quickly on that. And just that discipline is really kind of confidence building. When I get the chief exec on the phone from France, what's going on, I can tell him off the top of my head, what we did, last week, wherever it was, because we care, but also we kind of look at that.
Yeah.
It's surprising how many businesses don't.
And I'm sort of also conscious that that's the thing that people looking to exit a business and suddenly realize that that's the thing that they have to do in order to get it ready for sale. And it can come as a sort of a eureka moment for some people. I think that has been my experience in talking to entrepreneurs. And what I would also like to ask you about is just when you're using that data and making decisions, how important, or do you involve your team? How do you,
totally.
You talked about groupthink, so you're kind of trying to avoid that. So I'm presuming that the team is important in that process.
So I suppose we're now at a kind of scale of near about 100 people in the UK. Although I love data, I'll be standing on other people's toes if I was doing it. It's much more empowering to them to allow their curiosity to run wild. Oh, wonder why that's happening here. Without somebody curious in data, you'll get nowhere. So I think it's really important to have good discipline, but curiosity. Oh, that's a bit odd. Why is that happening? And going to kind of keep digging until you find an answer is really important. But it's each of us present our own numbers every single Monday morning about what's going on, and if are we off, are we on, quite quickly. So we just go through the big kind of dashboard that we have. Right, here are the kind of top broadly 20 numbers that are important to running the business. And it really pretty much is, we can read the numbers. It's more, are we on track or are we off track? And if we're off track, take it offline. We're going to talk about that as an issue and see, well, what are we doing about that? And that's the same, remember, if we're off track because we're above target as well as below target.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're utilizing your team. You sort of discovered or recognized you've got the right data and you understand the future potential of the business. How then did you look to sell it?
Yeah, I think probably the most important thing is to build a profitable business, number one. So when I took over, we weren't profitable, and the only skill I had was getting the great people. Remember, number two, got the focus. Number two was getting great people on board. Got a really good sales director, got a really good finance director on board, who kind of really helped. We already had a good marketing director, partnership director, and ops director. So between the six of us, there was half were new and half were, I would say, old but existing. So that kind of meant that we still had corporate memory as well, which is really important. So we don't make the same mistakes twice, or at least in the same way. And so number one was just driving the business as hard as we could, almost to a point where we didn't care about what the number was. It was more just, are we on the right trajectory here for growth? Number one. So you have to drive a profitable business. It's worth nothing unless it's worth something to somebody else. And that kind of probably comes on to kind of number two is, who are you selling to, and why, what are they looking for and why? There was kind of Roman sort of philosopher Seneca that said, no wind blows in the right direction. If you don't know which direction you're going to, any wind can go anywhere, so it's important to know where you're going. And I think on my first sale of a company was a law firm, and again, similar sort of brief, was kind of listing along and was to kind of turn that around. And I went out to potential buyers and corporate finance houses to go, we're looking to sell this thing in 2 or 3 years' time. What sort of size and shape do I need to be interesting? Or what kind of key attributes to the business are attractive to potential buyers? And I got all this advice for free, which is wonderful. And just chapped on the door with Deloitte and PwC, etc., the kind of senior partner of kind of corporate finance, and they're always looking at young bucks coming in and turning a company around because they might be able to sell that company for them. That's how they make their money. And that very quickly gave the kind of shape and size of what was attractive. And on the first business, it was the attributes were, be a thorn in the side of your competitors, right? So if you're a key disruptor in the market, you're just a pain in the ass. And either they're going to do two things about you: take you out by just annihilating you, or buy you, right?
Yeah.
And it can go either way, right? Well, that's what makes it exciting, to be a kind of true disruptor. And that's what we were back in the day. For this sale with ABGI, we were Jumpstart, as we were called then, was much more being a strategic fit for another larger company who did something similar. So they're looking to buy into scale, or they're looking to buy into a geography. And we ticked both those boxes. So we were profitable, well run, and it ticked their box to buy something in the UK, we're French owned, to have that as part of their overall portfolio. But we weren't too big that we were too expensive. It's kind of quite a funny thing. And actually, I'm looking at quite a few opportunities at the moment where companies going very, very quickly, looks great. They're now too expensive for many people to buy. And actually lies a problem, is actually they've now gone past that point. They should now look at a different capital transaction. They should go and list or go to a private equity house that's got really deep pockets. So the kind of corporate finance route is really important to kind of be aware of your funding options, but also your exit options. So a lot of homework to do. But anyway, I stayed on. I think that's the most important thing.
And so I suppose there was a lot of work in that, and you stayed on. How did you cope with the workload and pressure? Was that a challenge for you, or something? I think I have a sense that you found that exciting, but
I suppose the wife and kids didn't, because they never saw me. I think, look, if you're going to run a business, you need to be prepared to put in a lot of hours. And I think when you come to prepare a business for sale, or you're in a sale transaction, you're looking at 16-hour days for many days for many, many months. And I think it was probably 10 to 12-hour days for 3 months, and then 16-hour days for, I'd say, probably at least 6 days a week for 3 months, because you're cycling 2 bikes at the same time. Is probably the analogy I can use. Is you really have to pedal fast to do what you said you were going to do in your investment memorandum. Which was what made you attractive in the first place to your potential buyer. And there's a lot of deals that fall foul. Either the price is suddenly dropped at the last minute, or the deal folds at the last minute because you don't deliver that last quarter's results that's what they're basing the price on. So you can't, let go of that. You have to ride that as hard as you can. I think it's the expression I heard is, ride it like you stole it. Just keep going with that. And at the same time, you need to do all the fireside chats and the management briefs and the investment memorandums and the endless requests for data that come from lawyers, from audit firms, etc., involved in the purchases of those things. And you've got your own team also doing that as well. So, and what you tend to find, or certainly I tend to find, is it's generally between yourself and your finance director who do everything, because you do not involve your whole company in telling them that you're selling it. Because it kind of, you tell them what it wants.
Horses.
It's done, which is a consequence to you, which generally is all good. But generally, a lot of people get worried by that, and therefore you're back to, you won't deliver the plan if you've got lots of people worried about if they're going to have a job or not. So it's be prepared to do a lot of long hours.
Yeah, and obviously you've stayed on. So does that continue, or how did you find the new relationship? Has that been a challenge? Well, maybe that's not a question you want to answer.
I'll be open and straightforward. I don't mind it. I've really enjoyed it, to be honest. But I think I suppose we had 3 suitors on the purchase, and one was actually a higher price, but actually was just going to rip the business apart. And the founding directors were keen that we continue on with something. And we had I suppose a familial or patriarchal or matriarchal position with the company, that we felt an obligation of care to our own teams and our staff, etc., and their jobs. So we didn't really like that. And the price point wasn't really worth all of that pain and heartache that we give to people. Number 2 was just a different cultural fit. And I said, and what the last one we went with, which is the one we're with, just seemed like a really good cultural fit. And they said, no, we want we want you to keep running the business. We want you and your team to keep doing it. It's just, we're going to give you more money. We want you to go and acquire other businesses when you grow the company even faster. We'll give you anything you need to be able to make that happen. That was like, wow. Like walking into a sweetie shop being sold, which one do you want? And then you say, everything, please. So that was an easy decision. It's not always easy, though.
Yeah, I mean, my next question was going to be, was it worth it? But it sounds like it really was. When it has,
like, I think there's a number of aspects that I think, generally speaking, financially, it's always worth it. It's an exit of some type. If you're selling a business, either you're in a senior leadership role and you've got some equity in there, so you're aligned to that, and that's where I was. Or as the founding directors, you walk away and those other guys retired, and they were really happy with that. So I think for them, it was a really nice, clean exit. For me, it was a really good cultural fit. But more than that, it was much more around the opportunity to keep growing the business, etc. And quite a lot of the deals, and this is quite an important point, I suppose, a lot of the deals can be quite complicated, and earnouts are a fairly standard feature of a lot of exits. And for those that, if I don't know, I can explain that, but broadly speaking is, you might get some money now, but you need to hit the numbers you said you were going to hit over the course of maybe 2 or 3 or 5 years, depending over the scale of the earnout. And mine's over a couple of years. And there's normally a sweetener to that as well. So if you do what you said you're going to do, you get what you're going to get. If you do even more, well, it becomes even more interesting. And I think that's kind of quite an interesting place to be, being aware that it's quite common to do earnouts, and therefore you're going to have to keep yourself motivated and keep going, even though you might not be the one that's making all the decisions all the time. And that can be quite hard for a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you've been very generous with your time, conscious of time a little bit, but I have a couple of questions. First one was, um, did you have you talked about mentor early on. Have you used mentors throughout your career? Can you say a little bit about the importance of that?
Yeah, I think I've had, so suppose kind of two mentors. One was a long time ago, you know, it was 20 years ago, and I've kind of kept in touch, and he's a close friend of mine now, but was that guy in Scottish Widows that maybe saw a spark or saw somebody, but I worked my ass off, and I went to him and said, look, I'd like to do this MBA, and then subsequently I worked for him again, actually, about 10 years later. He took on a job and said, look, Scott, I'd really like to work together again. And, there was always stuff I'd throw past him. He was 15, he is 15 years older than me, and just more experience and greater skill set and a broader perspective. And that can be really, really helpful. I think it's really important, and I suppose my hesitance about mentors is, what is it you want and why do you want it? And how do you articulate that to mentors? I think I've seen door openers or counselors as mentors. That can be really useful as well. You go, I'm trying to get into this sector, can you help? Great, that's fine. I suppose just a mentor for the sake of a mentor can be quite, without a lack of purpose, etc. I tend to see those things fizzle out. The last thing I would say is number two, my second mentor, and I've had her 26 years now, is my wife. She's Dutch, and that's really important to know, because I've never asked my wife what she was thinking, because she's told me already. So in my experience of Dutch people is they're really kind of quite to the point. She keeps me grounded. She tells me as it is, but also she's nothing to do with the business, and she just comes at a different perspective, and I can come home and I can talk about a business problem, and just that somebody to just even talk about it. Quite often I solve it myself by just talking about it, and that can be really helpful. Just somebody who actually doesn't know anything about business, and she's a very qualified dentist. Somebody who knows me, but also can just prompt me. It can be really important.
I think that's really important. It's something we encourage our students to think about, the diversity of the mentorship that they get, and almost treating it like you develop your own personal board of directors, and you will get advice in different areas from different relevant people. And I think that's a very important point, is to have that feedback loop in some way, whether it's friends or family, or whether it's somebody with relevant corporate experience or whatever. So that's really interesting. And I suppose just to finish up, if you had maybe top 3 tips for our students or our aspiring entrepreneurs, what would they be?
Well, I suppose I've given quite a lot of tips already.
You
actually,
have already,
top 3 tips. I think define. I suppose, what do I look at? I suppose for me, myself, what's driven me on is define what success looks like for you, right? Whatever that looks like. It could be to have a family, it could be start a business, to get the next job, whatever it is. I think, if you're starting out, you need to know what good looks like for you, not what your parents have thought or other people or whatever, just really for you. I think it's number one. I think a very hard one to do, but really important to do, is define or identify what is your unique skill set. What is it that makes you that's different from somebody else? And it could be the personality, it could be your humor, it could be your management style, but those are the things you need to be able to know yourself, but be able to articulate, and also know where the gaps are in that. It's back to point number 2 earlier on, which was get good people on board. What is it you need that you don't have? And then number 3, and we're back to the skiing story, and Olivier, who was my instructor, he called it being comfortable, being uncomfortable, right? And a little story behind that is that I'd do something and it would just not feel right, and I would go live. It's just, it feels uncomfortable. It just, I don't know, my hips, my arms, my legs, whatever it was. And then he was like, Scott, I don't care. You need to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and then it becomes comfortable, and I think that is a really important thing in life. You've got to put yourself out there, be uncomfortable. Something scares you, something that you take risks on, and the more you do it, the more comfortable you are being in that environment. That's Absolutely. My top.
I think that's fantastic advice, Scott. I think, that whole idea of talking about resilience, and particularly in the current global climate, it's so important. So that is incredibly good advice. I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your experience and your stories with us in this session. It's been brilliant. I'm sure the whole Napier community will really enjoy hearing your story. So thank you again for doing that.
Thank you.